Joseph once glimpsed a vineyard in Pharaoh's prison, 3 branches budding, blossoming, bearing grapes pressed into the king's cup. That vision lasted 3 days, a moment of hope in darkness. But Isaiah's vineyard spans centuries. What Joseph saw as immediate restoration, Isaiah reveals as eternal drama. This is not just prophecy. It's the love song of creation itself, written into the fabric of time. Chapter 4 ended with promise. The branch of the Lord, beautiful and glorious, Jerusalem purged by fire and spirit, Mount Zion covered with divine protection. Now chapter 5 shows us why that purging was necessary. Before the branch can flourish, the vineyard must be judged. This is the song of the beloved about his vineyard, planted with hope, tended with care, yet yielding only wild grapes. It's the story of every nation, every soul, every heart that receives divine love, yet turns it bitter. Listen. The vineyard of time is speaking. Verse 1 begins, "Let me sing for my beloved, a song of my beloved concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a fertile hillside." The prophet becomes a minstrel, but this is no ordinary love song. The beloved is God himself, and the vineyard is Israel, chosen, cherished, set upon the most fertile ground of covenant and promise. Yet notice the layers. The beloved could be the prophet singing on behalf of his people, his song both praise and warning, both intimacy and accusation. The fertile hillside is not merely land, but the covenant itself, a high place of spiritual potential where law, prophets, and divine presence converge. To be planted on a hillside is to be given every advantage, yet height carries risk. A vineyard on a slope can flourish beyond measure, but if neglected, its soil erodes, its vines tangle, and its fruit turns wild. The opening verse holds 2 truths in tension. This is love declaring itself, yet already love trembling on the edge of lament. The song begins in hope, but carries within itself the seeds of sorrow. Verse 2 continues, "He dug it and cleared it of stones, and planted it with choice vines. He built a tower in its midst, and hewed out a wine vat as well. Then he hoped it would yield grapes, but it yielded wild ones." This is the song of infinite devotion. The digging and clearing are acts of covenant. God removing every obstacle so his people might grow straight and true. The stones cleared away are the idols, the false gods, the hardness of heart that would choke spiritual growth. The choice vines are Israel itself, not wild stock pulled from the hills, but carefully selected, cultivated, set apart for a purpose beyond themselves. These are souls chosen not for privilege, but for responsibility, planted not for comfort, but for fruitfulness. The tower in the midst is his watchful presence, the divine protection standing guard over the vineyard. Its prophecy rising high to warn and guide. It's the glory of God dwelling among his people. The wine vat is the vessel of destiny, the temple prepared to gather offerings of righteousness, the heart ready to receive the fruits of faithfulness. Yet the tragic refrain echoes. He hoped for grapes, but it yielded wild ones. The fruit looked promising from a distance, but tasted bitter when pressed. Outward observance masked inward rebellion. Religious activity concealed spiritual emptiness. This is measure for measure disappointment. Love given completely, devotion offered wholly, yet the harvest soured by the very freedom that made love possible. Now we come to verses 3 and 4. "Now, inhabitants of Jerusalem, men of Judah, judge, pray, between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I had not done for it? Why, when I hoped it would yield grapes, did it yield wild ones? The love song becomes a courtroom drama. God calls the very people he planted to judge between him and his vineyard, an extraordinary invitation to divine transparency. The case is laid before them, every gift given, every support supplied. What more was there to do? This is not rhetoric, but genuine grief, the bewilderment of love that has withheld nothing, yet finds itself rejected. Law was given, prophets sent, miracles performed, presence manifested. The vineyard was fenced, cleared, planted, watched, equipped for fruitfulness. The question pierces, why wild grapes? Why does blessing turn to bitterness? Why does chosenness become arrogance? Why does freedom become rebellion? The mystery of the human heart stands exposed, capable of receiving infinite love, yet choosing to return distortion. On the soul level, this is the divine interrogation of every heart. What more could the Creator have done? Every faculty of wisdom, every capacity for love, every spark of divine image, all planted within. Yet the soul can choose to yield wild fruit, pride disguised as piety, knowledge twisted into arrogance, strength perverted into oppression. The courtroom scene reveals the fairness of judgment and the transparency of love. Even in accusation, invitation remains. Verses 5 and 6 follow. And now, let me tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be consumed. I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled. And I will make it a desolation. It shall not be pruned, and not be hoed. And briars and thorns shall rise, and the clouds I will command, that they rain no rain upon it. The sentence is removal, not destruction. The hedge of divine protection is lifted, that invisible shield that held back chaos, enemy, darkness. The wall of covenant privilege is broken, the special status that elevated Israel above other nations. When God says he will remove the hedge, it means his hidden hand of providence steps aside. What was kept at bay, confusion, invasion, the consequences of rebellion, now has permission to rush in. The vineyard becomes desolation through abandonment. Not pruned and not hoed means no divine correction, no spiritual guidance. Briars and thorns are the unchecked growth of pride, anger, falsehood, vices that spring up when virtue is left unguarded. The withholding of rain is the withdrawal of divine blessing, the closing of heaven's windows. This is the silence of God, more terrifying than his thunder. The soul left to itself, without divine discipline or supernatural sustenance, quickly tangles with weeds of its own making. Order maintained by grace unravels into chaos when grace is spurned. Yet even here, mercy hides within judgment. The vineyard is not uprooted, merely unguarded. The possibility of return remains, waiting for the cry that will reopen heaven's gates. Verse 7 unveils the parable. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his cherished planting. He hoped for justice. Look, injustice. For righteousness. But behold a cry. The mask falls away. The vineyard is Israel. The cherished planting is Judah. God's expectation was justice in the courts and righteousness in the streets. Instead, he found corruption and the anguished cry of the oppressed. The Hebrew wordplay cuts like a blade. He looked for mishpat, justice, but found mispach, bloodshed. He sought tzedakah, righteousness, but heard ze'akah, a cry. Each expectation is met by its twisted shadow. Law becomes lawlessness. Compassion becomes cruelty. This reveals the divine heartbreak. God planted his people, not merely to be blessed, but to be a blessing, not just to receive righteousness, but to radiate it. The vineyard was meant to be a source of sweetness for the world, its wine bringing joy to nations, its fruit nourishing the hungry. Instead of justice flowing like a river, there was the stagnant pool of corruption. Instead of the music of righteousness, there was only the cry of those crushed under oppression. The wine had turned to vinegar, the song to a scream. On the cosmic level, justice is the alignment of heaven and earth, divine order flowing unhindered into the world. Righteousness is the soul fulfilling its purpose, radiating light like a vineyard bearing fruit. When these fail, the very structure of creation groans under the weight of distortion. We now come to verses 8 through 10, the first woe. Woe to those who add house to house and join field to field, until there is no place left, and you are made to dwell alone in the midst of the land. In my ears the Lord of hosts has spoken. Many houses shall be laid waste, great and fine without inhabitant. For 10 acres of vineyard shall yield but one bath, and a homer of seed shall yield but an ephah. The woes begin, 6 pronouncements that diagnose the wild grapes. The first strikes at greed, the insatiable hunger to consume more, pushing neighbor against neighbor until no space remains for anyone else. House to house means the drive to swallow possessions without end. Field to field means wealth amassed without limit. But the spiritual dimension cuts deeper. This is the soul piling desire upon desire, crowding out the stillness where God might dwell. The heart becomes a marketplace with no room for the sacred. The judgment is precise. Those who grasp everything will end with nothing. The houses stand empty, the fields barren. Greed drains blessing from the very thing it seeks to possess. 10 acres yield barely a cup of wine. A field of seed produces almost nothing. This is the paradox of spiritual economics. The more you grasp, the less you hold. The soul that hoards loses its capacity to receive. The hand closed around earthly treasure cannot open to receive heavenly gift. The verdict to dwell alone reveals the ultimate poverty of greed, isolation. Surrounded by possessions, but cut off from people. Surrounded by land, but severed from God. The greatest wealth becomes the deepest poverty when shared with no one. Verses 11 and 12 bring the second woe. Woe to those who rise early in the morning to chase strong drink, who linger late into the night, their wine inflaming them. They have lyre and harp, tambourine and flute, and wine at their feasts. But the work of the Lord they do not regard, and the deeds of his hands they do not see. The second woe shifts from greed to indulgence. Morning begins not with prayer or purposeful labor, but with the pursuit of intoxication. Evening stretches into night as appetite becomes master and senses are dulled by excess. The instruments of worship, lyre, harp, tambourine, flute, are perverted into entertainment for the self. Music that should lift the soul to God becomes noise that drowns out heaven's voice. Wine that should gladden the heart before the Creator becomes fire that consumes awareness. The tragedy is spiritual blindness. The work of the Lord they do not regard. Surrounded by divine artistry, sunrise, seasons, the intricate dance of creation, they see nothing but their own pleasure. The hands that formed the universe go unnoticed, while they applaud their own indulgence. This is the soul choosing the lower over the higher, the temporary over the eternal. Pleasure becomes God, appetite becomes law, and the infinite capacity for joy is wasted on finite things that cannot satisfy. The woe falls not on joy itself, but on joy severed from its source. When celebration becomes an end in itself, rather than response to the Creator, it becomes addiction, and the music of worship becomes the noise of self-absorption. Verses 13 and 14 reveal the consequence. Therefore my people go into exile for lack of knowledge. Their honored men are famished, and their multitude parched with thirst. Therefore Sheol has enlarged its throat and opened its mouth without measure. Down go their nobility and their multitude, their clamor and their revelers within it. The feasts end in famine, the revelry in exile. Those who drank in the morning thirst in captivity. Those who filled their ears with music find their voices swallowed by silence. Exile for lack of knowledge means more than military defeat. They ignored the wisdom that sustains life, Torah, truth, awareness of divine presence. Without that root, branches wither, and the tree is transplanted to barren ground. Sheol, the realm of the dead, opens its mouth wide, swallowing both noble and common. The image is of an insatiable appetite, death itself growing fat on those who chose appetite over wisdom. The clamor of the feast becomes the silence of the grave. This is the soul's trajectory when cut off from its source. What begins as celebration ends in emptiness. What starts as fullness concludes in famine. The mouth that consumed endlessly is itself consumed. The throat that demanded more finds itself in the throat of death. Yet even here, the language hints at reversal. Knowledge can return, wisdom can be recovered. The mouth of Sheol can be forced to release its prey. Exile is not annihilation. It is education in the wilderness, preparation for return. Verses 15 through 17 present the great reversal. So humanity is bowed down, man is humbled, and the eyes of the lofty are brought low. But the Lord of hosts is exalted through justice, and the holy God is sanctified through righteousness. Then lambs shall graze as in their pasture, and strangers shall eat the ruins of the rich. The vision turns. Human pride, once lifted high, is bowed to the dust. Those who exalted themselves are humbled, their gaze cast down. But as humanity sinks, the Lord rises, not through might or conquest, but through justice making itself known. This is the paradox of divine revelation. God's holiness becomes visible precisely when human arrogance collapses. When false strength crumbles, true strength shines. When counterfeit glory fades, authentic glory appears. The image of lambs grazing in ruins speaks of peace returning to places once marked by violence. Simple life resumes where complexity had created chaos. Strangers eating the ruins of the rich means what was hoarded unjustly returns to those who need it. Mystically, the bowing down of humanity is the humbling of ego, and the exaltation of God is the recentering of the soul on its true foundation. The lambs are the humble finding rest. The strangers are sparks of holiness long excluded, now gathering their share. The scene shifts from judgment to restoration, from collapse to quiet renewal. The vineyard may be desolate, but the possibility of new growth stirs in the silence. Verses 18 and 19 bring the third woe. Woe to those who drag iniquity with ropes of falsehood, and sin as with cart cords, who say, "Let him hurry, let him hasten his work, that we may see it. Let the plan of the Holy One of Israel draw near and come that we may know it." The third woe condemns not mere sin, but sin wrapped in cynicism. Dragging iniquity with ropes of falsehood means carrying rebellion openly, pulling it along like a prize possession. What should bring shame becomes a source of pride. The cords grow stronger with use. Lies and justifications entangle the sinner deeper in rebellion. Sin becomes routine, hauled along daily like a cart tethered to oxen, until the burden seems normal and the weight feels natural. But the mockery cuts deepest. Let him hurry. Let him hasten his work. This is not prayer, but taunt, daring God to act, as if the absence of immediate punishment proves divine weakness. They treat prophecy like empty theater, demanding spectacle on their timeline. This is the arrogance of treating eternity as entertainment, challenging the infinite to reveal itself on finite terms. It's the opposite of faith, not trust in the unseen, but demand for the visible, not submission to divine timing, but insistence on human schedule. The cords that bind are also the cords that will be cut when judgment comes. What seems like strength, the ability to mock heaven without immediate consequence, is actually the rope by which the mocker hangs himself. Verses 20 and 21 deliver the fourth and fifth woes. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. These woes strike at the heart of spiritual reality, the deliberate inversion of truth itself. Calling evil good means more than error. It means consciously renaming reality to serve desire. When darkness is declared light and bitterness praised as sweet, the moral compass spins without direction. Language itself becomes corrupted, words no longer pointing to truth but to power. Sweet is whatever serves the self. Bitter is whatever demands sacrifice. The fifth woe deepens the picture, wise in their own eyes. This is pride in false wisdom, self-made truth that bows to no higher law. To be clever in one's own sight is to mistake wit for wisdom, argument for righteousness. Mystically, this is the soul's inner light reversed. What was meant to illuminate the path to God becomes clouded until the eye sees only itself. The sweetness of divine truth becomes bitter when ego distorts it. The darkness of rebellion masquerades as brilliance when pride wraps it in clever words. These are not woes against ignorance, but against willful perversion. The danger is not that people cannot distinguish good from evil, but that they choose to rename them, justifying what they desire while scorning what heaven commands. Verses 22 and 23 pronounce the sixth woe. Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine, and valiant men in mixing strong drink, who acquit the guilty for a bribe and deny justice to the righteous. The final woe drips with bitter irony. True heroes should be known for courage in battle, but these are praised for their capacity to consume alcohol. Valor should belong to those who defend the innocent, but here it's wasted on mixing drinks. The corruption runs to the core. Those entrusted with judgment sell it for a price. Justice becomes commodity. Truth becomes merchandise. The righteous are crushed while the guilty walk free, their purses heavy enough to purchase acquittal. This is strength perverted, courage misdirected, discipline that should have been channeled upward, self-mastery, restraint, moral clarity is poured out in indulgence. The very guardians of order become agents of chaos. Mystically, this represents the complete inversion of spiritual authority. Those meant to be watchmen become thieves. Those called to be shepherds become wolves. When the protectors become predators, the entire structure of trust collapses. The irony is that their heroism in drinking will not sustain them when real courage is needed. When the storm comes, their valor will prove to be vapor, their strength an illusion dissolved by the first test. Verse 24 brings the fire of judgment. Therefore, as the tongue of fire consumes stubble, and as dry grass sinks in the flame, so their root shall rot, and their blossom shall blow away, like dust, for they have rejected the teaching of the Lord of hosts, and despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. The 6 woes culminate in a vision of total consumption. Fire licking up stubble, flame devouring dry grass. Judgment comes suddenly, completely, leaving nothing to resist. The image penetrates to the source. Their root shall rot. Not just the visible branches, but the hidden foundation decays. Their blossom, all outward achievement, beauty, pride, scatters like dust in the wind, weightless when severed from its source. This is not arbitrary destruction, but consequence flowing from cause. The root rots because divine teaching was rejected. The blossom vanishes because heaven's word was despised. Covenant was the source of life. By cutting it, they cut themselves off from fruitfulness. The fire is not merely punitive, but purifying. The flame of divine truth that burns away what is false until only the eternal remains. Stubble burns because it has no substance. Dry grass is consumed because it has no root. What has depth and foundation survives the flame. Mystically, this fire reveals rather than destroys. It exposes what was always true, that life severed from its source cannot endure, that beauty divorced from truth cannot stand, that strength apart from God becomes weakness. Verse 25 shows the hand still stretched out. Therefore the Lord's anger blazed against his people. He stretched out his hand against them and struck them. The mountains trembled, and their corpses were like refuse in the streets. Yet for all this, his anger is not turned away, and his hand is still outstretched. The vision intensifies. Divine anger blazes. Not the petty fury of wounded pride, but the consuming fire of absolute holiness encountering absolute rebellion. The strike shakes mountains, showing that nothing stands beyond the reach of justice. Corpses in the streets paint a stark picture. What was precious reduced to refuse. What was cherished now abandoned. The devastation is complete, comprehensive, undeniable. Yet the verse ends with a haunting refrain. His anger is not turned away, and his hand is still outstretched. This is the terrible persistence of divine love. Even in wrath, the hand remains extended, ready to lift if repentance comes. The same hand that strikes is the hand that saves. The gesture of judgment is also the gesture of invitation. But until the heart turns, the hand hovers in discipline rather than blessing. This is love's last resort. Not abandonment, but intensity. Not giving up, but pressing harder until the soul breaks open or breaks apart. The stretched out hand awaits one response, the reaching back of a repentant heart. Verses 26 through 30 raise the banner of judgment. And he will raise a banner for a nation far away, and will whistle for it from the ends of the earth. And look, it comes swiftly, quickly. None of them grows weary. None stumbles. None slumbers or sleeps. The belt of their loins is not loosened. The strap of their sandals is not broken. Their arrows are sharp, and all their bows are bent. The hooves of their horses are like flint, and their wheels like a whirlwind. Their roaring is like a lion. They roar like young lions. They growl and seize the prey. They carry it off, and none can rescue. And on that day they will roar over it, like the roaring of the sea. If one looks to the land, look, darkness and distress, and the light is darkened by its clouds. The banner raised signals the summoning of judgment. A distant nation receives the divine whistle and comes without delay, tireless, relentless, perfectly equipped for war. Their description is supernatural, never weary, never stumbling, never sleeping, belts fastened, sandals unbroken, weapons sharp, horses swift as flint strike, chariots spinning like whirlwinds. This is more than human army. This is the force of destiny itself, empowered by divine decree. The imagery culminates in the roar of lions seizing prey with none to rescue, the crash of sea waves overwhelming the shore. When the prophet looks to the land, there is only darkness and distress, light swallowed by storm clouds. Historically, this points to Assyrian and Babylonian invasions. Mystically, it represents the unleashing of consequences when covenant protection is removed. The lion's roar is judgment resounding through history. The sea's crash is chaos unleashed when divine order is abandoned. Yet even in the darkness, mystery remains. Clouds can conceal light without extinguishing it. The roar that terrifies can also be the voice that awakens. Within the storm of judgment, the possibility of redemption stirs, waiting for hearts willing to hear beyond the thunder. The Vineyard song closes not in sweetness, but in shadow, not in harvest, but in desolation. What began as love's melody has become judgment's lament. The beloved's careful planting has yielded only wild grapes. His patient tending has been met with rebellion. Yet this is not the end, but the preparation. The fire that consumes stubble prepares soil for new planting. The storm that darkens sky will eventually break, releasing rain for the seedlings that wait beneath the surface. The 6 woes revealed the wild grapes in detail, greed that swallows everything, indulgence that sees nothing, mockery that fears nothing, inversion that calls nothing by its true name, pride that learns nothing, and corruption that protects nothing sacred. But within each woe lived its own reversal. The greedy will find solitude, the indulgent will discover thirst, the mockers will face reality, the confused will confront truth, the proud will meet humility, and the corrupt will encounter justice. The song of the vineyard is also the song of the human heart, every soul planted by divine love, tended with infinite care, given every opportunity to bear the fruit of righteousness. When that fruit turns wild, the same love that planted must also prune, the same hand that blessed must also discipline. For the vineyard is not abandoned, only left fallow. The gardener has not given up, only stepped back. The hedge may be removed, but the ground remains. The tower may stand empty, but its foundation endures. In the darkness that ends this chapter, those with eyes to see can glimpse the first faint stars of hope. The hand is still stretched out, no longer only in judgment, but in patient invitation. The banner is still raised, no longer only summoning destroyers, but calling for those who will return. The vineyard of time awaits its true harvest. The song of the beloved echoes still through the corridors of eternity, waiting for hearts that will learn to sing in harmony with heaven's love. Until that day, the song continues, love's lament becoming love's longing, judgment's darkness pregnant with redemption's dawn. I want everyone to understand Isaiah, so let me know in the comments if there is a verse or phrase you didn't understand, and I'll clarify it for you. Next time, we'll see how Isaiah moves from this devastating song to glimpses of divine glory.